Yeah, so we've looked at just about most of jQuery, I think, and we've only got a little bit left, but the part that we have left is huge. It's massive. Yeah, it's like bigger than the bug. The part that we have left is Ajax and Async, and it's, like I said before, a really big part of jQuery. For some people, it's the whole reason why they take a dependency on this library.
Ajax.
It's the whole reason why they use it, yeah. So what is Ajax?
A cleaner? Wait, maybe not. So Ajax,
Similar.
Actually, it kind of can be. So asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So the first bit of it sounds
clears
good.
It right up.
Right, clears it right up. And then you get to the XML part, of which we don't usually work with XML with Ajax. But that's the acronym. But usually instead of the XML part, we use JSON, which is when you put XML on a diet.
Yeah.
Right? Diet data. So that's what that's about.
Yeah, and in fact, the object that we're working with is the XML HTTP request, because that's what it's always been called, and yet we don't really have any XML in the mix.
One little mistake years ago with XML in a data format, and we're still paying for it.
Actually, you know,
later.
I was just talking with you at the break about a podcast episode that I listened to on JavaScript Jabber. They were interviewing Brendan Eich, who is the creator of JavaScript. He was talking about the history of some of this stuff, and it's really fascinating. I would encourage you all to go listen to that. It's really interesting to read about or listen to things that happened 20 years ago or more that went into the decisions behind these things. You can figure out why things are named the way they are, why they work the way they are. Into antiquity, I think they'll always work that way. Okay, let's look at where we're at in the agenda. Once again, we have 7 modules. We are going into module 6. We're talking about Ajax and Async, so we're nearing the end. And that's this module, Ajax and Async. Not necessarily related concepts. I mean, they do work with each other quite a lot, but we went ahead and packed them into one module here. In this module, we're going to be looking at the global Ajax event handlers, so the things that we can do to hook into the Ajax cycle, what happens before, during, and after an Ajax call. We're going to look at some helper functions. We're going to look at like the low-level, here's how to call Ajax using the Ajax method. But then we're going to look at these shorthand methods that jQuery gives us to make it, once again, easy. I mean, that's what the whole point of jQuery is to make JavaScript easy.
Yep.
And that's what it does with these shorthand methods. It makes even calling the jQuery method easier. So that's fun. And then finally, on the topic of async, we're going to look at the deferred object in jQuery and figure out what that's going to do for us and how that affects our Ajax even. Okay? Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. Global Ajax event handlers. So here they are, the global Ajax event handlers. This isn't a huge topic in my opinion, only because I don't tend to need to hook into these too much. Now I suppose that if a person is creating a jQuery into their architecture, they might have very good reason to hook into these events and do certain kind of cross-cutting concerns before every Ajax call or during every Ajax call or something like that. I don't know, do you ever use them?
Not very often. I haven't. Jeez, I can't remember the last time I would have actually used them as opposed to the standard Ajax call.
Yeah. Yeah, so just like the other events that we saw in the other modules, you can say something like Ajax start, and then whenever an Ajax message starts, you're going to have an opportunity to do something there. In the event args, you're going to be able to capture what it is that's being sent, manipulate it. If you want to see some really good examples of that, I would encourage you to go to, once again, the jQuery API documentation and look at the global Ajax event handlers, and they'll give you some really good demos of when you might want to use that. We're just not going to cover it right here. So the helper functions. The helper functions actually are pretty cool for when and if you need them. Now, if you're just using the easy method for doing Ajax calls, it may be that you never need to use these helper functions. But in the off chance that you actually need one, boy, they sure are handy. Like the stuff that they do is really, really helpful. Excuse me. So here they are. There's 3 of them. Again, it's not too hard, not too difficult to wrap your head around. We've got jQuery param, serialize, and serialize array. Those 3. Whenever you see that something has jQuery param, you know that this is actually just a $sign, okay? that when you use it in your code, you're going to use it like $.param like this. Okay, that's how you'll use that global method. We are going to bring an example up on the screen, and this is pretty cool actually. I haven't used these helper functions much. Once I looked at them, I thought, you know, that one would actually come in handy. But one of the things that really surprised me is some of these advanced concepts in query parameter construction here. Now notice that one of these is for jQuery before 1.3.2 and the other one's for after 1.4. So in my opinion, because I don't need to support any old stuff, I just go, okay, fine, I'll just cross that out, and I'll just cross that out. But that's the way those worked before jQuery 4, okay? Right. But look at what happens when you call this helper method, this param helper method, on a little array. This is actually an object here. There's the object with a named value called A, and it has an array, 2, 3, 4. When it puts those into the URL as query parameters, I was reminded of how it actually is able to do that. Notice that I'm calling this A, this one's called A, and this one's called A. I've got 3 parameters that are the exact same name, and they use our JavaScript-y array syntax. And so what this does is on the other end, on the receiving end, this gives us an array called A with the values of 2, 3, and 4, which is exactly what we passed in. And that's the whole point here, is to try to relay by way of the query parameters exactly what we are working with. Some JavaScript object goes into query string parameters, comes back out on the other end, and it looks the same. That's what we want. So the second one is all the more interesting, and I beg you to study this one. This one is passing in an object with 2 child objects, 1 and 2, and then another object with an array that is obviously jagged because it contains a couple of numerics and then another object. So this is just kind of crazy nested, right? Well, look at what that gives us. It gives us one parameter that is a sub b of 1, a sub b is sub c is 2, and then an array called d that is 3, 4, that's these 2 values here, and then d sub 2 sub e is 5, and that gives us this value here. So really cool the way that works, in my opinion. I really love that we have a format for relaying JSON by way of query string parameters. Right. So that's the params. Let's look at the serialize. Serialize takes something like this form field, where I've got a drop-down list, some checkboxes, and some radios, and it turns that into a serialized string. And this is in the format that's expecting if I'm going to do an Ajax post. So if I do a post to a web service, and I want to pass in data, this is the format that posts are expecting data in. So this method, .serialize, you're going to be able to give it any arbitrary object that you want, and it's going to turn it into that exact syntax, okay? And normally you don't call this serialize on an object, you call it on a form itself. So you have a form on your page, you just say serialize this, and that's what it turns it into. If you have a form on your page and you want to see the results of that form, that filled out form in JSON, then just use serialize array, and it's going to serialize it for you in JSON. We'll see both of that. We'll see that one next. So here's a form at the top. I'm submitting it, and then with the submitted form value, I'm saying this. I want to serialize that array, and then that is turning into what you see here, a big name-value pair of objects that are all arrayed together. I hope that's clear. Let's go ahead and move on and look at the low-level Ajax functions. So this is the most low-level, which usually means hard. Yeah. And means powerful, right? Yeah. So if you need that, if you need the power, you're going to have to take on the difficulty of calling one of the low-level interface functions. And predominantly, the most useful one is the Ajax function there. So the $.Ajax is a global function. By the way, I'm not sure that we've made that completely clear, but when you see something hanging right off the $, that just means that it's a global function. Yeah. It's not something where you're specifying a selector, and then you're chaining some method off of that. Rather, you are calling jQuery the library in general, and you're calling a method that sits directly off of that library. They call it a jQuery global method, okay? So this global method is the Ajax method. And the Ajax method is pretty heavy. There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
This sucker is going to be calling the service, passing all kinds of options to it, and then depending on all those options that go up to the service, it's going to determine how that service returns a result and how that result is returned to your code. So there's quite a bit that's going on there. So once again, we're going to need to go back to the documentation and look it up. We'll go to API documentation. In here, there's the Ajax section. The Ajax section is right at the top there, which is fortunate. And I'm going to go into the low-level interface functions. This gives us Ajax and the others, and I'm going to dive into Ajax. And inside of Ajax, you can see that it's expecting a URL. That's good. I mean, if we're going to talk to a service, we better define who we're talking to.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And then it's also going to allow us to optionally give it a bunch of settings. Now, those settings are in one of those big options objects. And so you're going to specify this options object, and you're going to pass in some or all or none of all of this stuff. Look at all of that. Woo! It just goes on and on.
So you
Lots
can
of
throw
stuff.
in everything, including the kitchen sink.
Yeah,
in there.
yeah. You could include every one of these options. They might not all go together. It might be nonsensical, but you could have a gigantic Ajax function that has a whole bunch of them. Here's just one where we have specified the URL, and we've specified an XHR fields property or option.
It's really
in
the
there as
most
well.
Popular one, I would say.
Is that
one.
Ajax?
Yep.
Oh, you think so?
I think so.
Interesting. I think as we get into services, people are using the get.json and the get more and more.
That also, yeah, also popular.
Yeah, they just make it a little bit shorter. It's just a little bit of convenience. But yeah, this one is the one that packs all the punch, and a lot of people use. Okay, so let's actually do a call here. In order to show this, we had to have a service. Now, there are lots of services out there, but there's this little concept you have to know about. It's called cross-domain scripting.
Yes.
And it's a rule. It's a rule that all the browsers have to follow. And it means if I go to a web page, I'm not going to feel safe if that web page goes to a whole bunch of other domains on my behalf and fetches stuff and returns it to me. I don't know where this stuff came from.
Right.
I want a little bit of security in knowing that if I go to xyz.com, I'm only seeing stuff from XYZ. Yeah. So if xyz.com, the developers there, could just access any other servers that they wanted to, there would be some security holes there. Yeah. There would be some issues. And so we've got these cross-domain concerns, and we have to resolve those in some way. And these resolutions amount to us figuring out a way by which we make the process safe. We don't have script injection going on. Instead, it's all just data that we're fetching from these services.
Right.
There's really two ways to do this cross-domain validation. There's what I would say is the old way, JSON-P, which stands for JSON with padding. And it's a little bit of a trick that allows you to, because we can't pull this JSON back from other domains without our browser saying, hey, that's illegal. The browser doesn't say anything about us pulling data back in a script tag, and so we're able to pull that back in a script tag and execute that script tag locally. It ends up being safer than just bringing back the script directly, but it's a little bit of a pain for developers. I hate JSON-P programming.
Yeah, I know.
It's no fun at all. So the second method, the more modern method, is CORS, C-O-R-S.
Yep.
Cross-origin, something, something. Something scripting. Resource
Resource,
scripting?
I think.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So CORS is really just an agreement between the client and the server. So that the client, which is the website that we're going to, says, hey, I want to participate in CORS, and the server says, I'm going to allow you, subdomain xyz.com, to participate in cores with me. And so they explicitly allow xyz.com to participate. And now there's a trust relationship there, and so now everybody's protected. The user's safe. So this whole matter applies, and if I show you an Ajax call from a website, like from inside of CodePen, it's just going to say, I'm not allowed to do that. In fact, let's try it.
Go ahead.
All right.
Do it.
Okay, so whenever I just go grab a service, what I usually do is I love playing with OData. OData is one of the funnest things in the world. So I go to OData and I grab the Northwind OData service version 4. And this brings back a JSON file, which is going to open in Visual Studio. And this JSON file describes this entire service and says what are all of the entities that are delivered by this service. Okay, so there's a bunch of them here: customers, employees, etc. Okay, that's what it gave me.
It's Northwind. Everybody knows what's there.
It's yeah. Everybody memorizes the
Still,
Northwind
it's
schema.
still
That's
a
right.
thing.
Okay, so that's what's returned to me. Now I'm going to open a utility called Fiddler that allows me to look at messages as they go, or even custom create messages on the fly. So let me go back here and copy this address. I'm going to copy that shortcut, and in Fiddler I'm going to go to my composer. And I know I'm going quickly, but you guys can go hit rewind and slow it down. So I'm going to execute this, and it's going to bring back some JSON for me. Right? Look at that. That's slick. If I look at the raw, this is just JSON. It's bringing back all this this entity set that I showed you.
Nice.
So let's look at the products. To look at the products, all I have to do is say /products. There it is. There's the products. Notice the size here. This is 4,313 bytes. That's right, bytes. And now I'm going to double-click on that one and look at the message. And here it's bringing back these products for us. There's one, and another, and another, and another, and a whole bunch of them. There's a lot of products that it's given to me. Well, I might, especially if I'm developing for mobile, I might just want a little tiny piece of this. Maybe when I fetch from this service, all I want is the product name. That's all I'm going to use anyway. So I'm going to go add that into my request. And I'm going to say, actually, I want to select just the product name. And then request. And now look at the size of this request. 878.
Oh, just a tiny difference.
As compared to originally 4,300, or even, as compared to 4,300. Because if I look at it now, it's only including that one property. This is awesome. This is really cool. Okay, so let's take this example and say, this is exactly what I want. This returns JSON. That's what I want. Let's use it. So let's go back to my, if I have it open here, I don't. Let's open it again. Go back to my CodePen. Go back to my introduction to jQuery. And I do have some methods here. And I wanted to use the Ajax functions, I believe. Okay, so don't care too much about this DOM. It's just a div. The CSS is very unexciting. It's this that we're concerned with, and I've got all this coded out or commented out for now. I've just got an Ajax call. So let's do this. Let's say URL is... Now, I am not able to type inside this screen. There we go. That was throwing me.
That was weird.
That was throwing me.
That bug again.
Yeah, it's that bug. Don't bring back the bug. There we go. I'm going to comment out the old one that I had. And look at this. I got this super awesome service that brings back JSON. I've got my success. I'm ready to console log my data. Once it comes back, I'm ready for success here. I'm set. I'm going to save it. I'm going to run it. Nothing.
Oh, no.
Nothing. I got nothing. Let's go look at my console and see what's going on here. Let's clear it, run it again, and it says, wow, it really didn't expect that. It actually came back with the value. Why in the world did it do that? It's supposed to get a CORS error here, and it did when I practiced it. Well, this is actually good news. It did come back with something. Interesting. Okay, well, that was supposed to show you that it was going to come back with a CORS error. The only thing I can imagine is that the service or the section of the service that I happen to grab already has it enabled, because you can see here that it says I sent a request to this address, and it was required that I used cores for this. I had to include a header. So in fact, if I jump over to Fiddler, you know, it could have been Fiddler that helped me out there, although I didn't. That's not the way it worked for me before. I'm going to look at this one right here. This is that service call, and I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to look at the raw request. Here's the raw request, and look here. This is saying for an origin, here's where I'm coming from, and for an accept. That's it, just for the origin, here's where it's coming from. So I'm sending that as the origin. Hey, server, this is where I'm coming from. This is a cores header, okay? Now, what I think happened, I'm not positive what happened here, but what could have happened is that in between the time that I last tested this and now, the Northwind service may have allowed either everybody through cores, or it allowed CodePen through cores. And so now it's working.
Right.
So very interesting there. The timing is impeccable, and not necessarily convenient, but impeccable for sure. Okay, so this is cool. This actually demonstrates what it looks like when cores works right. And I can actually use this service now. This opens up a whole new world for me, because what I did for you was I went to Visual Studio and I created a new Web API project. And in this Web API project called Cores Demo, I actually just went with the core. I shouldn't use the word core because that's now an overloaded term, but I went with the base template for Web API, but then I went into the config, the Web API config, and I said enable cores for all domains. So I just opened it wide up. This is what you would not do on your production server, but I opened it wide up, so now anybody could do cross-origin calls to this service. And then when I created that, I published it into Azure. So it's very easy now to just say right-click Publish whenever I change this. And I'll just show you the one controller that matters here really quick. I just have a get, and this get returns an array of 4 values, value 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's go look at this in Fiddler. In Fiddler, I'm going to save that one because it actually worked. That's wonderful. I'm going to go to Azure websites.net /API/values, and it's going to return to me JSON. And this JSON is simply those 4 values. If we look at it in the raw, it might make more sense to you. That's the raw that it's given back to me. And it is actually paying attention to the cores here. So if I send a core request, it's going to honor that. So I'm going to go back to my demo here, and I could use either one of these now, and this should actually work for me. This is console logging out that data. This is the Northwind one. Let's just take a look real quick at the very simple one, because the one that I made with just 4 values is going to be much simpler. So this is going to go to my demo, to the values. It's going to fetch it, and I'm going to console log the data here. So let's go ahead and execute it. There it is. And here's the data. The data that came back is that data that came back from that service. Now, it doesn't look so impressive because we're used to getting data back from services, but this is cool because this is from a website. One domain talking to another domain and pulling back this stuff. And we did it using jQuery's Ajax method. Now, the Ajax method really isn't difficult. There's not very much that you have to provide to it. You do provide everything to it in settings here. And so I've provided it a URL as a setting, and I've provided it the success callback as a setting. I wouldn't have to do it exactly like that, and I'll show you what I mean in a while, but that's quite simple. Now, let's do this same thing, but instead of doing it using the Ajax, let's use a shortcut method. So I'll comment that one out. We'll scroll down to the get. And the get is analogous to doing an Ajax, but it's a little bit simpler. You don't have to pass it in with a settings object. You can just pass in 2 things, the URL and a function. That function being the callback function for whenever it's successful. So really, as you can tell, it's really not that much simpler, but in some scenarios it is a lot simpler. So that's working. And then I'll skip over the post for now, but post is analogous to doing Ajax, but adding a type of post so that you're actually doing a post request to the server. For now, let's play with this a little bit. Let's re-enable this one. And we'll disable this. And I'm now fetching from the Northwind database a list of all the products, just their product name, and then I'm spitting that out on the screen. And if you remember, whenever we spit that out, it had an embedded thing called value. So I'm going to try to say console log data.value, and that should give me what's inside here whenever we get there. So let's run that. Let's clear this and run it again. And did it work? There we go. So there's the array. Here's the values. And let me just expand one of those. And we should see, for some reason, my developer tools is not working right. I'm going to close this down and reopen it. Okay, back where we left off. Open my developer tools. Run that. There it is. And I can expand it. Excellent. Oh, but I still can't expand. See, I can't expand some things in my tools. That's just really strange.
That is weird.
Okay, let me go ahead and just do it this way. I'll go into the first one. So that's bringing back an object that has a product name of chai. This is exactly what I was expecting, and it's pulling from this OData. So that's super, super cool. That's the Ajax function. And I actually jumped ahead and I showed you the shorthand methods as well. I showed you the get method. And each one of these shorthand methods just abstracts a little bit and makes your call that much shorter. But under the scenes, it's actually just using the more powerful one. So it's really not that big of a deal. But here are the shorthand methods. I've already shown you get, and I showed you post. There's get JSON, and the real value with get JSON, because it's not a lot shorter in syntax from the get, but the nice thing about get JSON is it expects that what comes back is going to be in JSON format, and so it is that much easier. You don't have to parse it on this end. So instead of calling Ajax, let me go down and let me comment this out. We're going to use this one, but we're going to overload it here and say get JSON. This is the thing I want to go to. And I'm going to output that data to the console. And here it comes back. And it looks identical to the way it did before, only because the console is capable of printing out an array in a format that looks good to humans. But the way this actually came back to us is as an array. So it would be ready to work with here. I would, for instance, be able to say data.forEach, and I would be able to write a function over each of these. These are products, so I'll say P. I would be able to write a function over each of these and do something with p.productName. Hope that's clear. So that's get JSON. The get script is actually going to bring script back from a server and execute it. Does that sound safe?
Not really.
Normally, dynamic execution of script is not a safe thing, but it may be that it's your server talking to your server. It's in a controlled environment. It's perfectly safe.
That may be okay.
So
yes.
in those cases, it might be perfectly acceptable for you to use get script, get something from the server, and execute it.
Right. Not everybody's going to follow that, though, and they're just going to be downloading script everywhere, and I've seen that happen, and it never ends well.
Yeah, no, people don't end up happy at the end of that one. And the final shorthand method that I'm going to talk to you about is load. So load is super cool. I still remember when I realized, when I learned about load, and I was like, oh man, that's going to make my life easier. Once again, it's just a wrapper around some of the other ones, but it takes some of these concepts and it puts them all together, and it makes for a really short call. So let's go to my pens, introduction to jQuery, and I believe here on the front page, I've got the load method. There we go. So you can see I've just got a results div. I've just got a simple CSS thing here. And then I'm going to say into that results, I want to load, and then I call that, that page. Now what I wanted to do here was I wanted to call, and we'll see if this is working just because the other thing was, but I wanted to go to this service that I have standing up, and instead of diving into the API and getting the values and getting JSON, like you'll notice that Internet Explorer says, oh, hey, this is JSON, that's not a web page. Instead of getting that, I wanted to go to this top level, and this is just HTML, and I wanted to bring this in. And in fact, I'm going to try it again because it might just work based on whatever changed. Let's try it. And no, it's completely blank. So the reason why it can't do this, in fact, we might see our error here. That would be super cool. Let's try this again. There's our error. It's saying the origin s.codepen.io is not found in the access control allow origin header. And you might say, well, I thought you added that to your web service. And in fact, I did. But when you add something into the web API config, it only affects the web API. So it's only affecting what happens rather under here. It doesn't affect what happens up at the root here. So that is not, in fact, enabled for cores. And so this is the message that you get. This is what you're going to see if you don't enable cores. So load is really doing a fetch. It's just doing a get. But with the results, it's then loading that into a DOM element. So it's something that you could do using the text or HTML or append or append to, one of those.
Yep.
But this is all making it happen in one swoop. And sometimes it's really excellent when you can just use this and you can go load a number of resources from online, pull them down, and automatically put them into a range, into an element with one line. It's super slick.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, that's the load shorthand method, and I think that does it for the shorthand methods. And now we need to look at the deferred object. Do you do a lot with async? What do you think of async?
Well, you pretty much nowadays have to do things with async.
Can't get away without it, huh?
Can't get away without that. Especially if you're doing WinJS development, it's built in. That's a very nice model. But yeah, you have to do async anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to divide the world of async for people that are trying to understand it into two worlds. There's consuming asynchronously, and then there's producing asynchronously. So if somebody else makes an asynchronous function, then there's a pattern that you need to learn in order to call that function and capture the ability to do something after it's done doing whatever it does. Okay, that's consuming asynchronous functions. But then maybe you want to actually create your own asynchronous function. You want to make one so that when people call you, you can tell them right away, here's a promise, I'll get back to you, don't worry about it. And then you can go about and look stuff up from the internet and look stuff up from a database, churn on some data, and when you're done, you can tell them, hey, remember that promise I made you? Here's the results. We're done now.
Yep. And
they can use that same pattern, and they can do something when your task is done. So that's what we're talking about here. Now, it is a bit different in jQuery than it is in other libraries, perhaps. Really, there's one standard for promises. There might be more standards, but there's one predominant pattern, and that is in the CommonJS library, and it's called the promise A pattern. And most people follow that, but a lot of people add some sugar on it. They try to make everything a little bit easier. jQuery is no exception. In jQuery, we have this proprietary deferred object. The nice thing is it plays really well with the main pattern. Okay, so you're going to be able to do all the stuff that you can normally do. So let's look at this. Now, if you go to the documentation, let me see if I have that up. I do. If you go to the documentation and you look at the deferred object, it's going to give you quite a bit of information here. Always, done, fail, is rejected, pipe, progress, tons of stuff. And it can be confusing. It can take a while to really understand what goes on with asynchrony in JavaScript. So what I've done is I've pulled out just a few that I think you need to know about. Okay? And we're going to learn those. So first of all, let's talk about consuming an asynchronous function, because that's kind of the easiest. And to look at that, we're going to look at then and done and fail and always. okay? And in fact, in the interest of time, we're basically just going to look at then and fail for now, and then we're going to look at the rest of these. So let's go back to our code, wherever that might be. Here it is. And we know that right now we're doing a load from this web service, right? I'm going to go ahead and set this back to values. This should load those 4 values. In fact, it does. Now it's going to load those. And what is returned from this load? Let's actually do a console log and just see. Let's see what that gives us back. So that gives us back this object. And if I look in there, it's got one HTML. Oh, this is load. I'm sorry. We're going to need to use get here. We're going to want to do a $get. The load doesn't actually return a promise. We're going to use the $get, and we're going to just call this. We don't need to use any other parameters for that. OK, so now let's try it. And what it returns is an object. And if I look into that object, and I kind of drill into the prototype, which, again, it's not going to let me. That's really too bad. I really have no idea why it is fickle about that. But if we were able to drill into this, you would see that this thing that we have, this result of a get function call, is a promise. It's something that we can hang off of. Now, you saw before that we did a get, and this doesn't do anything after our get, right? So we said function, and then we had the data, and then we did, I think, a console log of the data. So that was the way that we implemented that. I'm going to kill that last that wrapper console log now. We don't need that. And run it. And that gives us this object with value 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the data that was returned. So this is like our success handler. This is what we want to happen whenever the user comes back from, or whenever the code comes back from this call. Well, instead of specifying it as a callback here, we can do that differently. We can take it off of there, and we can, I like to hit return and then tab. We can say then. We're hanging a then function right off of the return of this get, then, and that's where I paste my function. Then, and it also has a payload that is the data that was returned. And then we're going to console log it out. And let's just make sure that we are doing this right by adding a get with then. There we go. We added something to it so we can tell. Get with then, value 1, 2, 3, 4. So that worked. And why would I want to do that? Why, if I have callbacks, and Rachel, I'm going to put you on the spot, mostly so that I have time to take a drink of water. Why would I want to use this pattern as opposed to using callbacks? Because we've got callbacks.
Right. Well, I actually like this. It's like the promise pattern or whatever the pattern name is. But with then and done, you get to say, hey, go out and grab some stuff, and then I'm going to wrap up some functionality. Or once you're done, wrap up some functionality. Basically, it behaves like a callback. So it's the same behaviors, just a little bit different of syntax. Yeah. So it makes it just kind of looks nicer, I think, very often.
Yeah, and with 1, it looks nicer. With 20, it looks way nicer. Yeah. Because you actually get to see that I'm doing something and then this, and then this, and then this. Whereas with callbacks, 20 callbacks, oh shoot, those are nested, right? Yeah. If you want a callback, if you want to call something and give it a callback, as a result of another callback, you do it inside of there, and you have to nest all of those, and you end up with this gigantic, terrible structure. Yeah. And it's also sometimes hard in using callbacks to combine and compose these handlers so that, for instance, it's one thing to say I want to do something and then do something else and then do something else. But what if you have 5 things and you want to say after those 5 things are done, all of them, then I want to start this next sequence of 5 things. That can be done with promises and using the promise pattern, but if you can do that in the callback pattern, it's terrible. Yeah, that's not a really nice syntax. Yeah, I think you're going to have to store a little state machine in order to keep track of what you've called back and what you haven't and tested. It'd be a lot of bad. Extra roll your own kind of code. Yeah, we don't like roll your own kind of code, right? We like writing code, but we like writing the code
that's important to help solve the problem that we have, not code to just make other code work, not infrastructure code.
Absolutely. I love to say it's all about developing the essence, not spending time on the ceremony.
Right, right.
Okay, so where are we? We have a get method that's coming back. It's using a then. By the way, I'm not going to talk too much about done. It pretty much does the same thing as then. The difference is that done enforces that this is the very last one, so if there are errors, it's going to throw them as opposed to just silently failing and frustrating the developer. So your pattern should be asynchronous call, then, done. So done should be your last
one.
Handler. Absolutely. You can also say fail. You would probably use these in conjunction, and they can be chained. So I can say fail. I want to write a function, and it's going to return to me the error and give me a chance to define what it is that happens when I fail. If I called this service and something bad happened, I capture it right here, and I get to fail friendly. I get to give the user a memo, a message that says, hey, this didn't work, something like that. I get to do a friendly failure instead of letting it throw an exception and climb all the way up the exception stack and crash the program or whatever. Okay, so that's a simple use of, this is basically how to consume an asynchronous function using the promise pattern. But now we're going to talk about actually creating an asynchronous method. So let's go ahead and leave this one here. This is, okay, so I'm going to tell you about something intermediate first. Let's write a function here called call service, and I want to wrap all of this with it. So all of that stuff gets wrapped. Okay, did I do that right? Call service, that gets wrapped, good. Okay, so I've got this function. I don't want to define what happens when we come back for the service here. I want to do that like closer to the use of the service itself. So I think I've got one extra curly brace there. Oh, curly brace management. We love you. All right, so now I am calling a function that does this. But what does my function return? It doesn't return anything right now. My function is a synchronous one. I want to turn it into an asynchronous one. Well, lucky me, all I'm doing is calling an asynchronous function. So all I have to do is say return whatever that returns.
Right.
Suddenly, this is an asynchronous function. And I would recommend that anytime you create your own asynchronous function, you follow the convention of adding the word async to the end, because then the person who calls it knows right away what type this is going to return to them. So unlike where you go, load, get, I guess I better go look up the documentation and see what that returns. If I say call service async is going to tip off the user that's using that, hey, this is going to return to you a promise. I promise. Okay, so that's if you conveniently are calling an asynchronous function. But what if you're doing something like set timeout for 5 seconds? Now, set timeout is non-blocking, so it's going to occur on another thread. And so it's not going to stop, and we're going to come right back from this very, very quickly.
Yeah.
At this point, I think it makes sense for me to jump into my official deferred demo because I have some stuff in there that will be helpful. Let's shrink this up a bit. I've got the jQuery deferred here. The DOM is insignificant. The CSS is insignificant. Here we go. Okay, so now this is what I want to illustrate. This is bad. What we're doing here is a get to a web service. Let me just try this. Let's do the bad thing. It's not bad as in it crashes. It's bad as in
bad thing will still work.
Yeah.
It'll technically work. It doesn't mean it's a good thing to do.
And it depends actually on your definition of it will work. I think that it won't do what we might be intending for it to do, so we could argue that it wouldn't even work.
Sure.
See, it's going to call the service, and then it's going to say done on the screen, right? So let's run it. Call the service, done. The only problem is this is an outright lie. It's saying that we're done, and it's not really done.
Right. Not only is it not done, but it may have bombed. We don't
That's a good point.
know if it threw an error quietly or something like that. So, yeah, we really have to use that async pattern, like with the dot done and the dot then.
Yeah, that's a good point. When this fires, it has no idea about the success, about the status of that network call. And as we know, the network could be down. I mean, it could be a variety of things. So let's use the good pattern here now. I'll go ahead and uncomment this and that. Now what I'm going to do here is I don't necessarily have the luxury of, because I'm using the set timeout just like I was showing you, so I don't have the luxury of just returning the results of somebody else's asynchronous method. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a function called myDeferred. Inside there I'm going to create this this jQuery deferred object. Okay, so if I take you back to my slides, which are here, I'm showing you about all of these, and right now I'm showing you about the deferred. Okay, this is an object that jQuery gives you. It's a little bit higher level of abstraction from a promise and makes it a bit easier to work with a promise. So there's the deferred, and then inside this function that I want to be asynchronous, I'm now calling the set timeout, and I'm waiting 5 seconds, and after 5 seconds, I'm calling the resolve method of this deferred that I created. So I'm creating my own deferred, waiting 5 seconds, and then I'm resolving that deferred. Okay? So what I've essentially done here is I've created for myself an asynchronous function. When people call this, they should be expecting a promise in return. So I should write the word async on here so that they know. And then when I call it, I should call it with that name. I neglected to do that before, so I'll do it now. So I'm going to call my own method, and because and I didn't show you this part, I resolve it right here, and then I return the D promise. So I'm returning the promise of this deferred object. That deferred object contains in itself a promise. If you just return that to whoever's calling your function, it comes back immediately, and they're like, great, I've got a promise, I'm good to go. I can dot then off of this now, and I can make sure that this happens at the right time. So let's look at how we consume that, and then we'll be all done with this module. So I'm calling myDeferred async, and then I'm going to append to the results, hey, I'm done with the custom deferred function. So if I run this, actually, what I'd like to do is put a little extra thing in here, which is just to grab that results and append starting the async call. So you can see when that actually runs. So let's run it. Starting the async call, done with the service. That happened too quick, didn't it? That should have worked correctly. Done with the service call. It's happening right away. Do I have anything? Oh, look at this. Done with the service call is happening right away. I'm just doing a get. I need to actually call my deferred. I've got a confusion of code here. I need to comment this out. All right, run it again. Starting the async call, we should wait 5 seconds here now for a response, and the magic thing is that no code is running during that 5 seconds, and we're not blocked. So we can accurately say, this is done, now we're going to do something for the user.
Right, and in the meantime, you could update the user interface, let
Yeah.
them know what's going on, progress bar, progress ring, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I didn't even mention this promise pattern is robust enough to not just tell you, I'm done now. It's able to tell you all throughout, I've made a little progress. I'm at 20%.
Right.
I've made a little progress. I'm at 23%.
Yeah,
and you can use that to update.
I think of promises also as like an IOU or a loan, right? So I'm, loaning it, and you'd give a little bit back until you paid it all off.
Yeah, there you
That
go.
kind
That's a
of
good
thing.
idea.
So it's like a loan, if you think of it that way.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and take another break, a 10-minute break, and we'll do our final module, Module 7, all about jQuery libraries, other libraries that you might want to use
All the
if you're using jQuery.
JavaScripting out there.
There you go. There's a ton of it.
Ton of it.
Okay, see you in 10.